This is identification and treatment of language disorders. This is going to be part 2 of chapter 7. Um, how are language disorders identified? The team members are pretty much always going to be speech language pathologists and parents. We're talking about kids. Um, if we're school age kids or preschool or daycare, it's going to include special and or general educators. Audiologists may be involved, pediatricians, psychologists. If there was a head injury involved, it could include neurologists, nurses, lots of different people. So depending on the medical aspects of it, more or fewer people are going to be involved in that identification and treatment of language disorders. The process, we're going to have a referral and a screening. If those warrant additional testing, we're going to do a comprehensive language evaluation, and then through that come up with a diagnosis. Children under age 5 are usually referred by pediatricians in consultation with the parents, and that's made because the children are exhibiting a developmental or acquired disorder that may place them at risk for language problems, or because warning signs are signaling the presence of a language disorder. So, right, if there's already a developmental or acquired disorder, such as Down syndrome, such as autism, such as head injury, that's going to be, sort of an automatic referral for a language evaluation, right? But we can have warning signs where the child is 16 months old, hasn't said any words yet, right? That's going to also concern parents and or pediatrician enough to get that referral in. A screening will follow that to determine the need for comprehensive language assessment, right? So do something quick, possibly, such as the early screening profiles or the Denver 2. Children who pass the screening test but show minor difficulties or exhibit risk factors should be continually monitored, but children who do not pass that screening will receive a full language evaluation, a comprehensive language evaluation, and the purpose is to develop a profile of linguistic strengths and weaknesses and identify needed supports for improving the language form, content, and or use. We're going to have a case history, a comprehensive language analysis, right? So really getting language on, in conversation, maybe at the one word level, and then evaluation of collateral areas. And we're going to use multiple methods to gather that information. So, right, when we get that information, we're going to want a speech sample of lots of different language. We're going to want standardized testing, non-standardized tests, all kinds of good things. So we talked about how the type of impairment can be primary, specific language impairment where there's no other known factors going on that may be causing the disorder. A secondary language impairment could be the child has Down syndrome, an intellectual impairment, has autism, and that's going to be believed to be causing that language disorder. We're going to look at the domains affected, form, content, use. Is it comprehension disorder? Is it production or expression? Is it a combination of comprehension and production? And we're going to then, if there is a disorder, we're going to talk about the severity from mild to profound. It's really important to get accurate diagnosis. You could have a false positive where a child that does not have a language disorder is diagnosed as having one. All right, you're going to see that a lot in children who speak a different dialect or speak a different language, and maybe, aren't doing really well in the classroom and have trouble with any kind of standardized or unstandardized testing, but they don't have a language disorder. They just have a different dialect or a different language, and it's going to take them a while to catch up. So then they end up being given a language disorder when they don't have one, which is a false positive. A false negative, a child who has a language disorder is not accurately identified as having one, Again, your most likely kids to have this are kids that speak a different dialect or language, where the speech therapist, the teachers are thinking, well, maybe it's just because, English is a second language, or, they're coming in from a different culture. Maybe we'll wait and see, and the child's not put on caseload when they need to be put on caseload. And so that brings us to the idea of dual language learners. I think we talked about this a little bit before. So you've got children who, different types of bilingualism. So simultaneous bilingualism is children who are under 5 and are acquiring 2 languages at the same time. And then sequential bilingualism is children who are over 5, and who have a native home language established but are now learning a second language. How are language disorders treatment? The nature of the impairment really will drive the treatment, right? Is it really a content language disorder where we need to increase vocabulary? Is it a form language disorder where it's the syntax, the grammar that's the big issue? Is it pragmatic, how the child's using language? Is it 2 of the 3? Is it all 3? It's going to really make an impact for how we're going to treat that, what we're going to do in therapy. Treatment is tailored to meet the unique needs of the child in terms of target, the strategies, and the context, and we'll talk about this right now. So treatment targets. Treatment approaches are tailored to the unique needs of the individual. Whoop, I just kind of had that right. So treatment targets are the elements of language that are addressed during the intervention, right? So what specifically are we going to address, right? If it's vocabulary issue, right, or how are we going to focus on that vocabulary? If it's a form issue and syntax, maybe word endings, INGs, EDs, apostrophe S's. So it's going to vary on what we're going to target, will vary on the needs of the child, and also, what the professional feels like is the most important thing to target. Treatment strategies. The strategy is the way an individual approaches a task and includes both cognitive and behavioral components. Treatment strategies will describe the manner in which treatment targets are addressed. When a child is young, we're going to use very much child-centered approaches. There might be a lot of play involved, where we get out items and context that the child really enjoys, and we start really trying to build and increase language. One example of that might be focus stimulation. Your book, I believe, talks about, trying to get the child to say, move up to maybe 2-word utterances, 3-word utterances, and maybe focusing on the word want. So if we have a lot of items out that the child wants and they go to pick it up, you say, oh, you want the dinosaur, and oh, you want the train track, you want the Legos, I want to play with this, I'm thinking that we're going to do this, I want this. And then so that's kind of focus stimulation, where you focus, you're going to kind of really bombard that child with the target utterance, and then maybe after they hear I want, then we start to maybe take some of the things the child wants, and then the child needs to start requesting, oh, I don't understand what you mean, tell me, I don't know, right? If they're pointing at something, oh, I don't know, you have to tell me what you want. So we're going to start getting that I want, in a very focused way, but still in a very playful, using items the child wants. As the child gets older, we might use much more of a clinician-directed approach. We might do a lot more drill with language and vocabulary and maybe grammar and word endings, and it'll be much more school-based, kind of clinician-directed drill, helping them out. Still, obviously, trying to have as much fun as we possibly can, but less play-based, less sort of child-centered approach. All right, treatment context, describe the setting in which treatment targets and strategies are used. And we want to try to include as many settings as possible. So, if we're only giving therapy at school, are things going to improve at home? If we're only having therapy at home and the child's in school, is there going to be carryover? So the younger the child is, we want them to receive treatment in the home if possible. Sometimes you can work in a daycare center, but that can be a little bit more difficult. So we want to give it in the house as much as we can. With older kids, they're going to get treatment at school if we're a school clinician. Um, and the two main models are going to be a pull-out model where you go and get the children, and the children actually come to you, either individual or small groups in a separate room. And that's sort of the traditional model of speech therapy, but we're now much more moving to a classroom-based model where the therapist goes into the classroom and works with the whole class or works in small groups, which includes their children on caseload. That way the child doesn't miss any time in the classroom, and also, it's the skills that they're learning can be used right there in the classroom in real life places. And there's no worry about, will it carry over? Will the child remember to do this in the real world? Well, we're doing therapy in the real world, so they don't even have to remember. All right, client and caregiver perspective. So always thinking about the caregiver perspective, what the client wants, what the family wants, the client needs, the family needs, and trying to do it, again, in that natural environment as often as possible. So getting them in real world environments, it's going to increase carryover. We're going to also really respect the LRE, so that's the least restricted environment. So when we're working in schools, we have to, it's the law that they're going to be placed in the least restricted environment. So getting pulled out of the classroom as little as possible. So they're with their peers for as much of the day as we possibly can. So that could be, again, pushing into the classroom, a classroom model, or just being in consultation with the classroom teacher, the general education teacher, and maybe they can do some things in the classroom to help. We're going to involve the family, right? If the family's involved and if they're in their everyday environments, it's going to produce more functional outcomes. It enhances access to the curriculum because, again, they're not being pulled out of the classroom. They're not missing class time. And it's going to really also increase discourse skills where, right, they're able to have conversations, right, real world conversations going on rather than just drills or sort of pretend conversations in the therapy room. Reading and writing goals for children with language disorders, and this can involve the speech therapist, general educators, reading specialists, special educators, certainly the parents will be involved, and sort of the foundational skills. So we as speech pathologists are going to try to teach sort of the foundational skills involved in language and speaking and also in reading and writing. So we're going to talk about phonological awareness, alphabet knowledge, print concepts knowledge, and alphabetic principle and reading fluency right now. Phonological awareness, so being aware of speech sounds, so awareness of rhyme patterns, so rhyming, and kids love rhyming, so snake and rake and take and bake, right, words that rhyme. Kids start to realize, hey, these are, it's not just, the snake's not just the snake, but the word snake actually rhymes with the word bake, and that these are individual words, and that those words rhyme with the word take. And so it's not just things, that words are words in and of themselves. And that words have syllables in the words so that you can hear different sounds. So taking, making, right? So we not only have words, but we have sort of parts of words. And again, so they become really aware of the sounds of the words themselves. Right, that's how we get phonological awareness, and that's what that means. Onset and rhyme boundaries in single syllable words. So the onset is the first sound of a word, and the rhyme is everything after. So in the word chair, the ch is the onset and the air is the rhyme, right? So the first sound is the onset, everything else is the rhyme. So again, it's starting to help kids like break things down. So ch, air, t, able, right? We've got onset, we've got rhyme. Again, these words are things in and of themselves. They've got pieces to them. And when we do the onset, we're also teaching initial sound. So what's the initial sound in ch, air? Can you hear that? Ch, air. Can you do that? Ch, 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 right? That's a sound. Or if we're talking about make, what's that initial sound of the word? Right. Again, really breaking down the sounds that make up the words. Alphabet knowledge. So also teaching children, right, do they know their 26 letters, knowledge of uppercase letters, lowercase letters, also letter sound correspondences, right? So what sound does an M make? What sound does an R make? And then also print referencing, where we're going to explicitly refer to letters while reading, right? So we can be like, oh, look at that letter. Do you see that R in reading? Let's talk about that R. Let's make that reading. Really focus on that R. Okay, do you see any other R's? Oh, there's another R, right? So really doing that, really pointing out letters, pointing out words, helping them understand that those things all go together. Print concepts. These refer to rules that govern print. So knowledge about how a book is organized. So right at the very beginning, we might just start reading books and, oh, that's great, I love stories and talking about stories. Right now, where the books, there's a cover page, and on the cover page is usually the title and the author, and then there's some pages, and then look, this is where the story starts. And so again, the book isn't just the story, it's all kinds of things. And so, we've also got functions of print in various genres, right? So you have a book, there's print in the book. You can make a list of things, right? A shopping list, that's print too. Look, there are signs all around us, maybe in the classroom. When you're riding in the car with mom and dad, you see signs. There's print on the computer, right? There's print everywhere. And then also talking about just major print units. So what would a unit of print look like, and right, how do we think about that? An adult should explicitly draw attention to functions of print when they're reading, right? So what's the function? Why is this print here? What's the story here for? Is it going to warn us about, being danger? Are we driving? Does it say stop? If we're reading a story, is it for fun, right? What's the function of that print? We've got alphabetic principle. This will increase the child's ability to identify and blend individual sound sequences in words. We're going to identify and blend familiar orthographic chunks, right? So like the word air, A-I-R, right? Oh, and then we've also got chair, and that also has that A-I-R in it, right? So there might be chunks of orthography of writing, of letters that come together. We're also going to recognize words as a whole unit, so that we get the idea of letters that make sounds, but we also have, oh, that's a whole word. In fact, here's the word words, and let's talk about that. The words themselves are whole units, and we can make analogies from known words to unknown ones, right? So that if we are talking about like late and mate, and right, so oh, if you know late, that has ate in it. What other words have ate in it, right? So known words to unknown words, right? So for the alphabetic principle intervention, if a child's really struggling with sort of letters and the sounds that they make and how they go together, intervention should be really intensive. So, we want to work as much as long as possible. It's going to be explicit, so we're specifically working on letters and sounds, right? We're not going to be doing anything else. We're going to be really working on those skills and really supportive, because this can get really frustrating for kids really quickly. So we want to really support them, really point out what they're doing well and improvements they're making, and that this can be hard for everybody, and that that's okay, and that we can work hard and we can do this together. All right, lastly, we've got reading fluency. Children need to practice reading aloud, so they need to have that practice. We as therapists should match the child's reading level to the materials, right? We don't want reading material that's way too hard or way too easy for the child. We want to help that child to read independently as much as possible, so maybe starting with something a little bit easy and slowly building up, so they can read independently and keep going, get some confidence, but also some skill. And also reading at the instructional level will build word recognition skills. So reading the textbooks the child has in class and the types of things the child's reading in science class, in history class, is going to really help them be able to read, for when they take tests and when they do homework. So we want to make sure that we are not just kind of making up what we're reading, but that it's really meaningful to that child so they can do really well in the classroom.